Hello everyone, this is Rebecca Lubert and I'm with the University of Minnesota Alumni Association. Thank you for joining us today. Today's topic is Exploring the Future of Work, Gen Z in the Workplace. And this webinar is hosted by the University of Minnesota Alumni Association in collaboration with the University of Minnesota Career Services Administration. And our presenters today are from Make It MSP and the Greater MSP team. And we'll go into more of their introductions in just a little bit. So as always, we like to thank our members of the Alumni Association and our donors for making the Alumni webinar series possible. So thank you so much for your membership and support. We also have a number of upcoming webinars. Another webinar that you might be interested in is called Attracting and Retaining and Supporting Professionals of Color, which is also presented by today's presenters from Make It MSP and the Greater MSP team. So definitely tune into that on May 7th. And then if you'd like to listen by phone, you may enter the number that's on your screen and dial the webinar ID. So that's another option for you. And I will let Emily take it away from here and introduce herself.
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Emily Fitzsimmons. I'm the engagement manager with Make It MSP, which is a strategic initiative of the Greater MSP Partnership. And we'll go into that relationship in a little bit. But I joined the team at Greater MSP in actually March of last year as a communications consultant. That's my background, is marketing and communications. But this October, I had the chance to join in more of a broader engagement role. So this is really the opportunity to work with people like Rebecca, like a lot of people that might be at your organizations, at corporations, at nonprofits, at the chambers of commerce, to move the needle forward on making MSP a place where all can thrive, can work, and can find meaningful connections.
Hi everyone, I'm Frances Huntley and I'm a research analyst at Greater MSP. I'm also a fellow U of M alumni. I have a bachelor's degree in global studies and a master of public policy from the Humphrey School. I've been with Greater MSP since 2017, and in my role I help to support the partnership's intelligence function. So we provide knowledge and insights to guide the Minneapolis-Saint Paul region's economic development strategy and work, which is really a variety of direct business attraction, regional marketing, and strategic initiative leadership, as well as a lot of support to our region's cities, counties, and private and institutional partners' work. And I just want to say thanks so much to Raquel and Rebecca and the Alumni Association for having us today. We really appreciate the opportunity to share this work and to continue to partner with the U of M and many of your organizations to help our region to grow and support all of us. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video here and just get started with our slides. So in our presentation today, we're going to start by just giving a little bit of background on the work of Greater MSP and Make It MSP and how this specific Gen Z work came about. Then we'll jump into what we found in our research and how those insights can inform organizational and individual work in our region. And at the end, we'll answer any questions you might have or open it up for further discussion around any of the topics or insights. So be sure to use the Q&A function at any time throughout our presentation, and Rebecca will get those over to us at the end. So the Greater MSP Partnership is a public-private partnership serving the Greater Minneapolis-Saint Paul region. Our mission is to accelerate regional competitiveness and inclusive economic growth through job creation, capital investment, and execution of strategic initiatives. We're a partnership of over 4,500 individuals from over 300 leading businesses, universities, cities, counties, and philanthropic organizations in the region. And we serve as a platform for regional leaders and organizations to come together to do the work they can't do alone. And through these initiatives and through the work such as regional strategic planning, goal setting, and business development project support. One of our most valuable projects, specifically in our research and intelligence function, is our regional indicators dashboard, which we've produced each year for the last 5 years. The dashboard's a set of shared metrics that tracks the region's change on critical economic, environmental, and social outcomes. We use it to guide the partnership strategy and work based on where the region's doing well, and we can tell a story to the world, like For instance, our female labor force participation. And then equally, where we see that we continue to face challenges as a region, we lead strategies and initiatives and partner with other organizations, such as the Center for Economic Inclusion, for instance, in the work to make our region a more inclusive place for everyone. And like I mentioned before, we have a set of strategic initiatives that we've built and operate within our partnership that drive the work in a set of key areas that are critical to our region's growth and success. And I'll let Emily just walk through each of these and introduce the initiative she represents today, which is Make It MSP.
Yeah, thanks, Frances. So you'll probably hear us mention that, again, Make It MSP is a strategic initiative. And what that essentially means is that through this research that Frances mentioned, we've identified either opportunities for growth or challenges on the horizon. And we've built these partnerships around those issues to try to, again, drive the economic growth of our region. So Make It MSP is very specific to talent retention and attraction. Obviously, this isn't the entire universe of the workforce. There's workforce development and workforce reentry, but to make sure that our work is very targeted, Make It MSP is all around attracting and retaining talent in our region. Other initiatives like MBOLD support food and egg sector growth. The Regional Air Services Partnership, which if you had the chance to hop on a plane to Mexico City or Dublin or Seoul in the last year, those were a result of this partnership. Forge North, which supports our region's startup and innovation ecosystems. Some of you may be familiar with MinCup, which is an extension of the Carlson School here. So that's a partner that's kind of in your universe that we work with. And then Connects MSP, which is closely related to Make It MSP, but in this instance is hyper-focused on building inclusive talent pipelines through career readiness programs, primarily that serve either underserved or communities of color. So what we'll quick do here is I'll tee up what exactly Make It MSP is, what we do, and how you can take this information about Gen Z and apply it in your own organizations the same way that we're doing at a regional scale. So first and most importantly is that we focus the work of this initiative grounded in data. So that means that everything that we do, we have the research to point to why we're doing it, the best pathways forward, and also to show partners to motivate them and to kind of get behind this work that we do together. Second, much like what we're doing today, is that we prioritize sharing our resources and our findings. It's not just the work that we can do on a regional scale with our partners, it's really what you can do in your organizations that intimately touch the talent that we're referencing. And third, that we set goals together. This is informed not just by our data, but also by the voices of our customers. So the work we do to connect directly with newcomers, to professionals of color, to tech talent, and so on. And then that we set priorities, we take action, and we measure those results. You may have seen, actually last year, we launched our 2030 ambition, which is that MSP will become a top 10 region at attracting and retaining talent. So this means that it's now our responsibility to set 3-year goals to that ambition and to set priority projects each year to keep moving the needle forward. Part of that early research that we did prior to launching Make It MSP was to, instead of taking broad strokes at attacking the talent challenge, was to create laser focuses. So these come forth through the 4 brands that we've created as tools to communicate with those key audiences. MSP Hello is our brand that targets newcomers. So those are individuals we classify as having moved to the region within the last 5 years. BMSP, which is targeted directly at professionals of color. This particular brand and work is really retention focused, being that we have found that professionals of color are leaving the region at a higher rate than their white counterparts. On the flip side, MSP Tech is very attraction focused. So this is the work that we do to get tech talent from some of the other tech hubs around the US to move to the Twin Cities and to build their careers here in our tech ecosystem. And of course, the audience we're talking about today is MSP Campus. And this is really around engaging interns and recent grads and sharing a collective story that this is the region to start and grow your career. So with that, that's kind of the why and how, and this is the what. So some of the projects that come out of this work is the work to equip partners. So these are the workshops that we host where partners can connect with one another and dive into data together from our insights reports, one of which we're diving into today. We create resources and tools, all of which, again, a priority to have free and open to the public through our makeitmsp.org website. Things that include recruiter toolkits full of goodies that you can use to help recruit talent, and also things like the Winter Guide, which is a great resource for newcomers that are trying to adapt to our crazy winters. We also work to facilitate direct connections through events, our newly launched MSP Ambassador platform, and regular newsletters that we send out to our audiences as well. Part of the attraction element of this work is our digital marketing and storytelling efforts. So we have digital marketing campaigns across the country, a blog that we use to elevate the stories of professionals in our region, and of course, social media as well as a way to communicate. And the last piece, which often goes kind of behind the scenes and unseen, is coalition building. So this is the work that we're doing to connect professional associations across the region to engage directly with campus and career services. And a good example from this year is actually that we're launching an initiative particularly focused on engaging with HBCUs, or historically Black colleges and universities, as a way to increase the talent pool of diverse candidates that we're bringing into the region. So before we dive into the research, I want to tell you a little bit how we're using it to frame our work as an MSP campus team, and also how that can also be the way that you're applying this data as well. The first is that we're taking these insights to help formulate an approach to bridging the partnerships between MSP employers and college and university career service offices. We're also using this insight to both identify and share best practices for engaging, recruiting, and retaining interns and recent grads, and then of course for promoting MSP as a region to start and grow their career. So again, today we'll be diving into some of the data that we use to develop this MSP, Make It MSP Insights reports on Gen Z. And also, just to note, in 2019, we also developed insights reports for the 3 other audiences: newcomers, tech talent, and professionals of color, all of which are available for free online. So before I kick it to Francis and we dive into the data here and explore Gen Z, I think a lot of people on this call are probably wondering, okay, but how has this changed? This research was gathered in 2019, and since then COVID-19 has rocked the landscape of what our workforce looks like. It's changed the way that we recruit on campus. It's changed the way that we attract talent and the way we engage with them once they're here. Nevertheless, what we really hope is that this research can provide your organization a foundation of understanding for what is sure to be one of the most impacted groups by COVID-19, Gen Z students. We'll also discuss that while many of our findings from the 2019 Gen Z research were affirmed in recent conversations that we followed up with these graduates in light of COVID-19, many of them have also actually intensified. So at the very least, we're hoping that this insight can provide a lens to which we can approach the next questions and conversations we have around Gen Z talent. So with that, I will kick it to Francis.
Great, thanks, Emily. So last summer, we set out to learn about Gen Z and how they were impacting our workforce and workplaces. We knew that this was becoming important because we heard from our employer partners and our MSP campus network of college grads that the work of finding careers and finding young talent was really beginning to change. We could see that the new generation of folks entering the workforce was going to look and feel a little bit different than the older generations who are mid-career or even retirement age now, who've been in these jobs and organizations for several years. So we did this research in 2 parts. First, we conducted a review of the literature and existing research, as well as demographic data on Gen Z in the US. Since this generation is just beginning to enter the professional workforce, there isn't much out there yet, but we found some informational surveys that have been done by Pew Research and others that helped us begin to understand some of Gen Z's more general preferences and views across the board. Then we conducted some interviews with interns and recent grads here in the Twin Cities to hear about their experiences in internships and in their career search in our region. We combed through the interviews and looked for common threads and themes in their experiences and in their preferences and concerns that could help us understand how our workforce and organizations will change as they continue to enter at a faster rate. So here, when we talk about Gen Z, we're using Pew Research's definition of Gen Z, which is folks born in 1997 and on. So the oldest of these individuals are 23 years old now, probably only a year or so out of college. And again, we know that they're entering the workforce at a quickening rate as they complete high school and college and replace jobs that baby boomers are increasingly retiring out of. Recent research from Manpower Group estimates that they make up about a quarter of the global workforce now. So their impact on our economy and our workplace is growing more significant quickly. And then we'll just start with a couple of really important pieces of information about this generation as a whole that emerged in our research and really helped to frame up the more qualitative findings and why they matter. First, this generation is extremely diverse. According to the most recent census data available, 38% of Gen Z in the Minneapolis-Saint Paul region are people of color, and 48% of the United States Gen Zers are people of color. In the top 30 US metros combined, 63% of the Gen Z population are people of color. So the diversity of this population really has some real implications for workplace strategies that we'll touch on more later. Next, here in the Twin Cities, we have a large proportion of Gen Zers relative to the rest of the US. The metros with the highest share of Gen Z residents are Riverside, San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, and Atlanta in that order. But the Greater MSP region ranks 14th. Nearly 26% of our population are Gen Z members. Again, we're classifying Gen Z as anyone born 1997 and on, so the oldest amongst them are 23 this year. So today we're going to touch on 5 key themes that emerged in our research about what Gen Z values and how their experiences are shaping the way they're entering the workforce. First, we saw that student debt is a really key factor driving their decisions about work and life. Second, communication in the workplace and with their employers appears to be really important to them. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a really big deal for them, which isn't surprising given that they're the most diverse generation thus far. And being aligned with an organizational mission and making an impact through their work is really important to them. And finally, having clear expectations and transparency around their career pathway emerged as a top priority in their career search. So starting with a theme we found around student debt concerns, what we heard when we interviewed Gen Z students in our region was that one of their major concerns and decision-making factors was their student loan debt. We decided to dig into this a little further to see what information was out there about how much debt this generation is really carrying. It turns out that the average student loan debt is more than $32,000 right now. This includes all student borrowers, those that have been out of school for 10 years, and then the freshmen that just took out their first loans. So for the number to be that high as an average across all loan holders is really quite striking. One student that we talked to in our interviews moved to California for a nanny position during her senior year, so she could start paying off her loans while she was undecided about her career path. This really shows how significant of a burden and concern this financial reality is. Others in our interviews mentioned that the student loan debt was one of their biggest concerns about the future in general. So we think this has real implications for employers beyond just considering salary levels. Emily, what are some of the things to consider in light of this reality that Make It MSP partners have discussed?
Yeah, I think the real key here is this longing for stability and security in both their career futures and whatever current job that they have. So some things that you can really think about is how are you making your Gen Z employees feel financially secure? And that goes beyond just salaries. It's about if you're offering debt repayment benefits, if you're offering financial literacy courses to help them feel more financially stable on their own. Or it could be at the very beginning of the recruitment process, if you're offering relocation packages or helping them find affordable housing in the neighborhood where they would be living and working as one of your employees. These are all things to directly demonstrate that you value Gen Z and that you're willing to kind of hold their hand and help provide that financial stability that they're searching for. Also, in light of COVID-19, we'll really only see this begin to grow. So in talking to Gen Z recent graduates as part of Greater MSP's recent listening project, we also heard that young people are particularly fearful of losing their jobs right now, being that they're the youngest in the workforce. This is only going to add to that feeling of financial and future instability. So anything that you can do to kind of help them either find that on their own or provide any other types of security around their jobs will be of utmost importance to them.
Great. We also found that Gen Z really uniquely values transparency at their workplace and frequent and open communication. As a generation with access to constant, instant communication enabled by technology, they've been shown to expect and prefer openness and fast responses, especially in the context of interviewing and job application processes. One survey showed that a huge majority, 75%, actually prefer in-person communication to digital. And then one of the most robust existing studies we found, which was done by Deloitte, showed that almost 40% of the Gen Z individuals they surveyed expressed concern that technology was actually weakening their ability to maintain strong interpersonal relationships. Then when we interviewed students and interns in the Twin Cities, one of the themes that continued to emerge around their experience with finding jobs and internships was the lack of feedback and response in the job search process, and then some concerns around organizational transparency in general. So a common thread here is just a real desire for consistent and meaningful and preferably face-to-face interaction. Again, we think this has some pretty clear implications for HR professionals and employers here in the Twin Cities, but also for all of us who can shape communication culture within our organizations and our social networks. Organizations obviously have some limited capacity to always communicate in this way, but we also have some great opportunities to cultivate more connection in our workplace. Emily, what are some things employers can consider around communication for our changing workforce?
I think you nailed it too, Francis. I mean, it really is how you're practicing communication across your entire organization. So some of the feedback that we got wasn't just communication in the vacuum of the recruitment process. It was really about how they were engaging with their managers throughout the early months to as they're looking to grow their careers, to the direct supervisors that they work with, to also their opportunity and access to leadership. We all know that capacity is obviously a challenge that we deal with in all forms when it comes to communication, but this is something that they are valuing and seeking. Second is that the communication and how you demonstrate that as your values as part of your brand really doesn't have to start just with recruitment. It starts before. We found that a lot of students in talking with both people that are recruiting on campus and the students themselves, they're doing the research before they go to those career fairs. They're looking at how you're communicating with them on social media. They're paying attention to if the way you're showing up on campus is purely to promote your brand or if it is to listen to them and hear what they need. The ability to demonstrate these values really starts anywhere along the spectrum of how you engage with Gen Z students. And it's something that's important to think of, especially moving forward in this new digital age of communication when we are restricted to engaging on our online presence.
So like we mentioned before, another insight we uncovered was around the strong desire and value placed on diverse and inclusive workplaces among Gen Z. Again, this is not surprising, given that this is the most diverse generation racially and ethnically in America. And our region has some progress to make in terms of inclusion, especially around education and achievement, much of which is top of mind for this young generation just getting out of college. And this means that D&I efforts in our organizations and in our communities are increasingly important if we want to retain these professionals in our organizations in our region. Folks that move here from other large metros have historically had a hard time acclimating to our culture. And we heard that in some of our student and intern interviews. Make It MSP has a lot of resources available that Emily will talk more to that can really help us learn more about how to implement and strengthen D&I efforts in our organization.
Yeah, thanks, Francis. And the resources that we have available that you can find on makeitmsp.org is first and foremost a workplace inclusion toolkit that we did build. And this is directly with partners that are experts in the D&I space and also experts in our own communities of color as well. And this is really something that you can implement in your own organization that can help you no matter where you are in your journey with DEI at your organization to see how you can build a more inclusive workplace. But part of the key feedback that we got when talking to Gen Z were these questions that you should be asking your team. So the first is, what is your company or organization doing to be intentional about choosing diverse talent as sources for media coverage and stories? Again, to the point of, Gen Z is very engaged with the way your communications, the media, the way that you're promoting yourself publicly. Are you choosing to be representative, and are you being intentional with who is showing up in those media stories as well? Second is, what are you doing to expand the personal and professional networks of Gen Z talent of color once they are in your organization? This is critically important because what we found, and it kind of goes into the next point here about representation in leadership, is that in our latest survey for professionals of color from 2019, that since 2016, there's actually been a decrease in the number of professionals of color that feel that diversity is represented in leadership in their organization. These are the questions that Gen Z will ask you, and it's important to have an understanding of both the realities of your organization and what your plan is to ensure that they, as a professional, can advance in your organization. And of course, it's important to really note the impacts of COVID-19 on Gen Z talent of color as well. Research around how COVID-19 is impacting people of color is just emerging, but what is clear is that these communities are feeling the impact of the pandemic and the economic fallout in unique and oftentimes disproportionate ways. We know this was true for the 2008 recession, and we have much to learn from the experiences of professionals of color who also launched their career during a time of economic crisis.
Absolutely. Next, we saw that making a positive impact was a big priority for Gen Z. We saw an interesting article recently from BuzzFeed News that talked about how much global issues like climate change and COVID-19 are impacting this generation and how they feel compelled to be a part of making change. A Robert Half survey showed that many of them would even be willing to take a pay cut to work in a career where they could make a positive impact. This suggests that these folks are really paying attention to organizational mission and that that's a driving force in their career decisions. Emily, can you talk about what this might mean for employers in our region and people working with increasing numbers of Gen Z in their organization?
Definitely, and I think this is actually a good time to start with the impact of COVID-19. So we've been doing some initial research to kind of get the feel for how they're responding to this crisis, knowing that they've also been around for the financial crisis of 2008. They may have some vague memories from 9/11. And of course, in the age of climate change and gun violence, national crisis is kind of their normal. So even while they were obviously concerned for their own well-being, there is actually a greater overreaching concern about the plight of others who have it worse. They're very open to acknowledging their own privileges and have this growing intense passion around making positive impact through their career choices. So the first thing that your organization can think about is how are you clearly articulating your mission and your values, and perhaps particular to the time we're in now, how your organization or your company is joining the fight against COVID-19. What are you doing to support your employees during this time? What is the positive impact that you're seeking to make, if not through your own business operations, through the way that you're engaging and supporting your communities? Second is that because they want this to be part of their career, it's also important to tie in and recognize every individual's contributions to your organization's overall mission. So that could look like integrating your company's values into your performance review processes, seeing how your employee is embodying the mission of your organization, and recognizing and rewarding them as part of their job to be embodying that mission.
Definitely. And finally, we saw that Generation Z is looking to ensure that they know and can have a positive career trajectory as they start their careers. And they're paying attention to this from the get-go. We heard in our interviews that as they began their career search, they were considering what they had heard from peers and what they could see within organizations that they were applying to about what their career path could look like in that organization. A survey conducted by Ernst & Young of over 1,600 Gen Z interns found that potential for career progression and growth are the most important factor to Gen Z when they're searching for a job. They want transparency around this, and they really want to feel like their skills and passions and ideas can be realized. Emily, can you walk us through what the Make It MSP team has learned about the impact this has in our workplace?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, the anecdote that really pops out of a recent conversation I had with a recruiter that was working at getting Gen Z involved in some of their talent search was that if you're not showing up and showing Gen Z candidates what the next 5 years of your organization look like right there early in a recruitment process, you're not really demonstrating that you're thinking ahead of what it will look like if they stay those 5 years. So defining what career growth looks like in your organization, obviously it can take many shapes. I know that many organizations have skills training and rotational programs, or growth might look like taking on more managerial positions, managing interns, managing teams. Whatever that is, it's important that you define it and you articulate it to Gen Z, knowing that this is something that's going to be really critical to where they decide to go for their first job, and of course, if they decide to stay. So those are the 5 themes that we walked through and we found through our insights report. And here we really want to tie it in a little bit more intentionally to COVID-19. So some immediate actions and immediate things that we're learning from how these lenses that we've applied are impacting Gen Z today. So the first, in terms of student debt, is again, financial and job security may be a key decision-making factor for Gen Z. And that's in where they decide to live as well as work in light of COVID-19. Second is that communication is happening almost 100% virtually right now. So that means that it may take some extra work to really ensure that you are bridging the gap during interviews and onboarding with Gen Z. Also, it's important to recognize that not everyone is feeling the impact of COVID-19 equally. So not only think about how are you going to support Gen Z when they're being onboarded into your organization and how they may be impacted, but also how are you supporting your diverse teams and communities that are already in your organization today. Also, Gen Z, again, has grown up through numerous times of national crisis. They will seek careers that translate into real and positive impact. And lastly, that pathways for growth will be top of mind for Gen Z as they navigate these uncertainties of COVID-19. What can you do to provide some level of certainty and something that they can roadmap for their career pathway to help them find that sense of security? So with that, we'll start taking questions.
So I see that we have one here, which is a really good question. I'll just read it. In terms of the desire for Gen Z to have personal face-to-face communications, was there a difference between two-way video interactions versus only text or audio interactions? Asking this in light of the possibility of extended work involving distance and the use of interactive video technologies to execute work and continuous learning efforts. And we absolutely recognize that this might be the reality going forward, and this is, really significant, especially when we're talking about Gen Z. And so I know that the research that we found didn't really dig deep into, specific preferences around face-to-face communication, but I will say that, given that they are really looking for that more personal feel, I would only assume that any effort to make it more personal, probably video interaction seems to be the way to go here. I don't know if, Emily, you have anything to add on that.
Yeah, I can just add a little anecdotal insight. We did some focus groups on various campuses and found that particularly interns or people that were applying for internships, so students, really gravitated towards, from the onset, the interviews that were either video or in person, whereas the recording interviews or the type in, the answers to questions online immediately felt a little bit colder to them. And for someone that is seeking more of a human connection to their workplace, I know that any opportunity to have a name or a face to who they're engaging with was really valued by Gen Z.
Okay, it looks like we have another question here. How does Gen Z differ from the generations prior in terms of communication? What are some of the insights there that you have to share?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And, as kind of a first step, we looked at our research that we're presenting today as really a first step in looking at this generation, again, because they're just entering the workforce and we can't know that much yet. We didn't do a study of them in comparison to other generations, but we think that that'll be something really important to pay attention to going forward. And I will say that this, more desire for interpersonal communication in light of the fact that they've grown up with technology and iPhones seems to be one of the most significant and striking differentiating factors. Anything to add, Emily, on that?
No, I think that was perfect.
Looks like we have two questions here, similar in nature, kind of getting at what was the distribution of the survey across different types of employers or industries. One question about like agricultural sector as well as nonprofit. Do you have any insight on the breakdown of the survey respondents?
Yeah, we did not do a large number of interviews because the depth of the interviews were pretty significant. We were really trying to get some anecdotes about what really, defined their experiences. So we didn't have, certainly didn't have a scientific distribution that equally represented different career fields. But I will say we had a couple folks from like professional service firms, a couple of finance firms, and then others from like liberal arts majors who were just about to graduate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and actually that's a great tee up for some of the work that we're planning to do for 2020 is actually around food and egg talent. So that is starting to work. I know if you remember the slide that had embold, so obviously food and egg sector growth dovetails nicely with food and egg talent, which is a key priority for our region too. So a lot of what we will be looking at throughout both this year and in the future is that specific audience around food and egg, knowing that it is so central to Minnesota's economy.
Great. And what advice do you have for supervisors to support employees' financial goals when you're a part of a larger organization and have limited control in the benefits of pay, benefits, etc.?
I'll take this one, Francis. I think this is a question that, again, this is one of those that you only have, it's just mentioned, you only have so much power over, what you can pay, especially entry-level positions. But this feeling of financial instability is also just around, not having engaged as tightly with financial literacy. I think that being able to support your interns or your recent grads that are at entry level by providing some kind of literacy courses as part of professional development and personal development in your organization, that's a way that you can offer a certain level of control and stability over what they see as that financial risk.
I just want to jump in here. I see a question that's a great one that I want to take a minute to answer. We're hearing from students that many summer internships have been canceled, as well as financial impacts for their families due to COVID. Have you heard of coordinated plans to offer or highlight, oops, it went away, virtual experiences, I think it was basically saying. And we've been talking to our partners about this. And we've heard that the majority of them are not taking away internships this summer, but definitely modifying them given the COVID-19 context. Emily, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, so I think, the first, obviously that's a really difficult decisions that people are making right now, whether to, either go virtual to do a consolidated internship, so going from a 10-week to 6-week, maybe doing project-based, or, you know, worst case scenario, having to cancel. But a lot of these conversations around how to turn it virtual is how to do so while still giving that connection to the company. I think that's one of the things that's biggest at risk to being lost right now. And I know in particular some resources that have been really helpful for our partners that I know that they're using. The Ivy Research Council has some great resources on how to craft a virtual experience that can still be meaningful both in terms of the work and the connections that they can make to your company. NACE is doing something very similar. They have a lot of free online webinars and resources, and I think most of their COVID tools they've made completely free. That's another great resource. And then we've also seen various campuses, university and career service departments coming up with similar assets as well. I'm sure the University of Minnesota is working on, you know, connecting with partners and doing similar work. So finding a way to connect to those resources is a good way to get those things off the ground. And then of course, you know, continuing to engage with Make It MSP as these next 3 months, this is a key focus of our group too, is to find ways to lift those internship programs.
Another thing I want to answer, I see a question asking us if we have thoughts or suggestions about how organizations can attract diverse candidates, especially in rural Minnesota. And that's what our May 7th webinar is going to really talk about. We also have a workplace inclusion toolkit that Emily can talk a little bit more about, but we certainly have some ideas for that.
Yeah, I think as a follow-up, I'll definitely send out some of the assets that we've put together, but particularly in terms of, you know, attracting professionals of color or young talent of color to your organizations. I think some of the feedback that we've gotten, again, anecdotally, from students is that they really appreciate people that show up. I know this is hard because we're not showing up on campus, but make themselves available in spaces where they already are. So it's not just showing up to a general career fair. It's not just showing up to the professionals of color career fair, but it's showing up to their on-campus groups. It's working with national organizations like Manners and other, you know, national associations that are really meant to uplift and support professionals of color. So making those connections shows that you're really putting in the effort and being intentional about meeting them where they are. And that's a really good first step in doing so.
I also see a question asking us about the region that we cover. Greater MSP and Make It MSP are both focused on the Minneapolis-Saint Paul metro area. We define that as a 15 county area as defined by the census. And then keeping in touch with our research and Make It MSP, Emily is going to be your best contact for that. I think we can find a way to send her contact information. And then I don't know, Emily, if there's a way folks can sign up for our email updates.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that I mentioned is that we send out these regular newsletters. One of them is called Network News, and it is actually focused on providing updates about the partnership as well as resources that you can use in talent recruitment, if that is the specific or part of your organization that you're in as well. So when we follow up, I'll follow up with links to that newsletter sign up. That's monthly. So again, we try to consolidate a bunch of different resources and push that out, as well as events that you can attend to kind of further learning around this topic.
We have some information coming in here. One of our viewers, I believe, is from SciTech Internship Program, and it looks like they're just wanting to make an announcement that there are still STEM internships available for college students with small Minnesota companies. So that is scitechmn.org. It's a free program to students. So something to definitely look into if you're in the STEM field.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's actually good. It's very exciting. If anyone has similar internships that they know of that have become available, we are definitely engaging with partners that have some really high talent that have become available recently. So please do, in reaching out to me, let me know if you know of any opportunities like that as well.
On that note, Emily, someone's asking where folks can be job searching online. And I know that we have a portal. Are there any other resources you suggest for folks?
Yeah, so as Francis mentioned, on makeitmsp.org, we have a job board that uses an algorithm to pull open job positions from across the region. So these will pull, you don't have to go, one by one or industry by industry. It should pull all related to the keyword. And another great place is actually, I think it's Career Force, it's with D. So they have the Department of Employment and Economic Development has a great job board that they're really, especially in light of COVID-19, working on uplifting right now. I would also say that a unique one that's emerging as something that could really be future focused is called the Invisible Network. I can send a link to that as well, but that's unique in that it allows job seekers and employers to be anonymous. So if you happen to have someone that's looking to switch jobs but doesn't really want to post on LinkedIn that they're searching in case they may be employed somewhere already, this kind of offers that anonymous opportunity to do so. And it also is a great way of eliminating bias in the hiring process. Those are the three key areas that we have now. I know continuing to lift more of a job matching platform, knowing that more and more people will be searching for jobs and looking for that kind of one-on-one connection with new opportunities. These are things that our network of partners are actively thinking about right now too.
Those are great resources, and I definitely want to put a plug in for our platform that we fund our students to. So we encourage University of Minnesota students and alumni to use GoPass, which is powered by Handshake, and that is open to all students and alumni. So that's where we are actively encouraging students to look for internships and job opportunities. And we also encourage employers who are looking for fresh talent to post jobs and internship opportunities that are available, and if you're looking for entry-level talent. So that's another resource I want to plug. And then we also have the Maroon and Gold Network, which is a networking platform. So if you're an alum or employer and would like to network and open the doors to students who are looking for career exploration conversations, I really encourage you to consider the Maroon and Gold platform as well as a place to network.
Thanks, Rebecca. I saw an interesting question here. As an HR expecting a surge of Gen Z workforce, I wonder how they'll fit into teams with older employees. Will there be clashes in communication styles? And the Deloitte survey that I mentioned, where folks expressed concern that technology was weakening their ability to maintain interpersonal relationships, they also expressed that technology may have weakened their ability to communicate with other generations. And we found this to be a really interesting point. We don't have anything further on this. I don't know if Make It MSP has anything to add, but this is definitely something to think about as we think about how diverse our workplace is going to be, not only in terms of, racially and ethnically, but age-wise as well.
So it looks like there's some questions here about sharing of this recording and some of the resources that we mentioned. Yes, we'll be sharing this information within 1 to 2 business days, the recording, as well as some of the websites that we mentioned today. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And then we'll also send out with that a survey so you can provide your feedback on today's session. And then also we encourage you to provide insight in terms of future topics that you'd like for us to cover in the future.
There's one question about the statistics and whether they're just mostly relevant to the United States, and that is correct. That is what most of the research we uncovered so far is focused on. Emily, I see one here. I'm a student from India, and I've noticed that people prefer working from home rather than going to the office and working. How does this affect the communication aspect that we talked about?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And especially in light of, we've all kind of been thrown into this remote working world. And I think as we emerge out of it, we'll see a lot of these questions being raised. I know it certainly is being raised across our partners about what will returning to work look like. You know, as far as the preference goes, I think that's a unique insight that this individual is feeling that too, because you know, the preference to work from home means that they're probably feeling connected to their work, and that this video conferencing is working. I wouldn't know anything specifically about, you know, if that preference is prevalent across all of our companies, but I think that is definitely a question that we're going to be asking, particularly in the coming weeks and months.
And looks like there's a question here. If there are further questions about the data or other questions that a viewer might have, who would be the best for contact?
I think we can just send everything to Emily and get her contact information sent out. And then if there are specific research and data questions, she can get those to me.
Perfect.
Yeah, and again, very excited that there are additional questions, because the purpose of this research, to the point of, you know, our priority of sharing, isn't that we use it exclusively through regional work. It really is that we provide it to you and that you guys find a way to apply it in ways that create change in your own organization too. So definitely welcome any and all questions. And as engagement manager, that's kind of what I live off of too. Like I get excited about connecting with new people with questions and ways to engage. So I would really, really encourage anyone to do so if they're interested.
Emily, here's another great question that you might have some insight. Aren't some of the preferences of Gen Z also where businesses in general are trying to head as far as best practices, like open, direct feedback on a more frequent basis instead of annual reviews where it can be hard to correct unwanted behaviors or enforce positive ones?
Yeah, I think that's a good call out too, which is, I mean, that's a relief, right? Because that means that the generation that's coming to the workforce is aligning well with these changes that you're making. But that also might mean that they might have an opportunity to help shape those changes. So if this is something that they feel so passionate about, they may be a really good pool to tap into to help shape what those actually look like across your organization.
And how do people keep up with the research that's going on? How often will there be surveys and reports available? And what would be the best way to kind of stay up to date with that information?
Do you want to take this one? I mean, I think the best way will be signing up for this newsletter that Emily mentioned. We don't have specific plans right now for further Gen Z research. We really wanted to use this as a way to begin a conversation regionally and with our partners. And again, there isn't too much out there right now since this generation is so young, but we'll definitely be continuing to talk about this and follow what's out there.
Yeah, I think a good example of that is actually around our BMSP work around professionals of color. So for our next so the next webinar that we're taking part in, so that does take a look at a 3-year kind of gap in between research. So we did some comprehensive research in 2016 through a survey of professionals of color, and then in 2019 followed up with similar survey and data to compare and contrast. So that's a really good example of kind of how we plan to space out and then look at trends and changes across the research that we collect. I will say the piece that Francis mentioned earlier too, so the regional indicators dashboard, which kind of has the big picture of the economy as a whole, that still does provide some specific insight on, you know, specific factors of the economy, and that is developed annually, and I believe Francis is actually working on it now with the intelligence team. So if you're looking, that will provide a kind of a large scale picture on the economy as a whole, including talent migration, as well as racial inclusion, home ownership, kind of what makes up what it looks like to have a life in Minneapolis-Saint Paul. That comes out annually. So that is something that you can get a hold of, and it's free online.
Yeah, the 2020 dashboard will be available late May or early June this year.
It looks like there's a question about onboarding new employees and helping Gen Z employees with some of the issues that we discussed today and really just bringing them into the workplace. So maybe what are some strategies that managers or leaders can use to let work team members know about these findings?
I know some things that our partners have done that is helpful just because, again, these are a high-level general conversation starter data points, right? So some things that we found that has really been helpful is actually people to take these back with their team, sit down and see how it applies uniquely to their organization. So for us to provide kind of some blanket strategies, you know, it's not a one size fit all. And it's also important that not every organization has, you know, the same amount of Gen Z in their workforce. They may not have as many boomers in their workforce as well. So finding ways to put this in, take this data and really apply it to your own organization, I think will be important. As far as general strategies for being really intentional about onboarding, I know that particularly amongst our campus group, so our partners that are working together to talk through different strategies around virtual onboarding, they really are leaning on organizations like NACE and the Ivy Research Council. Those so far have been very helpful in kind of adapting how to go about these 5 themes in our virtual world right now.
Yeah, and something, just some insight from my perspective as someone who was a former supervisor, I think something that I find that employees really enjoy is having different conversations, having a professional development plan, having a career development conversation that's separate from a professional development plan, and having a strategic work plan. I think having 3 sorts of conversations and kind of having those as part of your regular repertoire of conversations is really helpful to kind of check in with your employees and just kind of get an idea of like, what are some of their interests, what are their goals, and how can you tie it into the work they're doing right now.
There's a question asking if we can speak more to the Campus Recruiter Toolkit.
Yes, I'd love to. So it's available on our website, that's makeitmsp.org. And some of the tools that are in that toolkit is we have a slide deck. So if you're looking at just talking about the MSP region in general, we have a slide deck that you can use that has some kind of like the hot hitting overview points about our region, some of the things that make it great, some of the things that we're working on to make it better. We have libraries of videos and photos that you can share with interns to help our students or recent graduates that you're recruiting to help tell the story of the region. And then we also have things like a cultural amenities guide for professionals of color that you may be recruiting to help them see what kind of assets are available to them in the region for their cultural needs. We have things like tours of the beaches, of the museums, of the bike paths, of the companies, of the tech scene. We have virtual tours available online. It's really a good mix of things to help them get to know both the region and tools to help them adapt to life here. So it's very much focused on adapting to life in MSP. There are some other assets in there that are just kind of like helpful, good to know tools that you can share with your internal team, your recruiter team, to help them better articulate the value of living in the region. And I'll be sure to include that link as well, because I know that right now recruitment is 100% virtual and these tools are virtual, so they are coming in handy for a lot of people right now.
All right, looks like we're almost at time here. I just want to thank Emily and Francis for all of your hard work in putting this information together. I definitely learned a lot from your presentation today, as I'm sure many of our audience members did as well. So I just want to thank you so much, and thank you everyone for tuning in today, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you.